My mother called me to her bedside on a Tuesday. Not my brother David, not my sister Emma, just me. Sarah, the hospice nurse said over the phone, her voice carrying that particular softness reserved for delivering bad news. Your mother is asking for you. She says it's urgent. She says she has something to tell you before she goes. I was 42 years old, a divorce attorney with a corner office and a reputation for being unshakable in court. I had seen families torn apart by secrets, watched inheritance battles destroy generations of love, listened to deathbed accusations that turned children against each other. None of it prepared me for what my mother was about to tell me. I drove to the hospice in a daze. The facility was one of those places designed to feel like home. Warm colors, soft lighting, flowers in every corner. But you could smell it underneath. The antiseptic, the inevitability. Death dressed up in comfortable furniture. My mother's room was at the end of the hall. Margaret Chen, née Williams, had been beautiful once. I'd seen the photographs. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, bright eyes full of mischief, a smile that could light up a room. The woman lying in that hospital bed bore little resemblance to those images. Cancer had hollowed her out, turned her into a skeleton wrapped in paper-thin skin. But her eyes were still sharp, still knowing, still carrying secrets I couldn't begin to imagine. Close the door, Sarah. I did as she asked. The click of the latch sounded impossibly loud in the quiet room. Sit down. I sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair I'd occupied for countless hours over the past 3 months, watching her fade, waiting for the end, never imagining what that end would bring. I'm dying, she said. Mom, don't. She held up a hand, trembling but firm. Don't give me platitudes. Don't tell me to rest. I've been resting for 70 years, and now I'm out of time. She turned her head to look at me, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before: fear. My mother, the woman who had raised 3 children while running a successful catering business, who had faced down bankruptcy and illness and my father's countless disappointments without ever breaking, was afraid. There are things I need to tell you, she said. Things I should have told you years ago, decades ago. But I was a coward, Sarah. I was afraid, Sarah. I was afraid of what it would do to our family. And now, she gestured weakly at the monitors, the IV drip, the oxygen tube in her nose. Now I'm dying, and I can't take these secrets to my grave. I won't. You deserve to know the truth, even if it destroys everything. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. She almost smiled. You should be scared. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything. Everything you think you know about our family, about your father, about yourself. I reached for her hand. It felt like holding a bundle of twigs. Whatever it is, you can tell me. Can I? She searched my face. Can I tell you that your father isn't your father? Can I tell you that I killed a man? Can I tell you that our entire family, every holiday, every birthday, every moment of togetherness, has been built on lies? The room tilted. What? Richard Chen is not your biological father, Sarah. Her voice was steady now, as if saying the words out loud had given her strength. Your real father was a man named Michael Harrison. He was your father's business partner, and 42 years ago, I murdered him. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. I sat there, frozen, trying to process words that didn't make sense. My mother, my soft-spoken, cookie-baking, PTA-attending mother, was confessing to murder and telling me that the man I'd called Dad for 4 decades wasn't my father at all? I don't understand, I finally managed. No, you wouldn't. She closed her eyes. It was 1982. Your father, Richard, had just started his investment firm with Michael. They were young, ambitious, convinced they were going to conquer the world, and I was lonely. She opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling as if watching the past play out above her. Richard was never home, always working, always chasing the next deal. We'd been married for 3 years, and I felt like I barely knew him. And then there was Michael. Her voice softened. Michael was everything Richard wasn't: attentive, romantic. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt since before we got married. We started an affair. It lasted almost a year. Mom, I got pregnant. She cut me off. With you. I didn't know for sure who the father was. The timing was ambiguous. But I told Richard the baby was his. He was so happy, Sarah, so proud. He started coming home earlier, paying attention to me again. I thought maybe everything would work out. But it didn't. No, her face hardened. Michael wanted me to leave Richard, said he loved me, said he'd take care of us. But I knew him by then, really knew him. He wasn't the man I'd thought he was. He was reckless, impulsive, capable of terrible cruelty when he didn't get his way. She turned to look at me. When I told him I was staying with Richard, he threatened to tell everyone about the affair, about the baby. He said he'd destroy our family if I didn't leave with him. What did you do? My mother was quiet for a long moment. I went to his apartment to reason with him, to beg him to let us go, to move on with his life. He was drunk, angry. He grabbed me, started shaking me, screaming that I'd ruined his life. Her hand trembled in mine. There was a letter opener on his desk, heavy, brass, shaped like a dagger. I don't remember reaching for it. I don't remember the moment of impact. I just remember the blood. So much blood. And Michael, lying on the floor, not moving. You killed him. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. I killed him. And then I cleaned up the evidence, walked out of his apartment, and never looked back. I pulled my hand away from hers. It was instinctive, a recoil from something contaminated, something dangerous. My mother watched me with those sharp, knowing eyes, and I saw no surprise in them, only resignation. They never found the killer, she continued. The police investigated for months, but Michael had enemies, business rivals, angry clients, women he'd wronged. I was never even a suspect. Because you were pregnant. Because I was the boring housewife, the devoted spouse, the last person anyone would suspect of violence. She laughed bitterly. I played that role for 40 years, Sarah. The good wife, the loving mother, the pillar of the community. And underneath it all, I was a murderer. I stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the manicured gardens below. The tone remains those paths. People whose mothers hadn't just confessed to killing their biological fathers. Does Dad know? Richard? Another bitter laugh. Oh yes, Richard knows. He's known for almost as long as I have. I turned back to face her. What? He found out about 2 years after Michael's death, found some letters I'd been stupid enough to keep, love letters from Michael, and a newspaper clipping about the murder. And he didn't go to the police? No. My mother's eyes met mine. He made me a deal instead. He would keep my secret, protect me, protect our family, as long as I stayed, as long as I was the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect partner in building his empire. He blackmailed you. He saved me. Her voice was sharp. Don't you understand? I killed a man, Sarah. I would have gone to prison for the rest of my life. Richard gave me a choice: stay and be the wife he needed, or face the consequences of what I'd done. That's not a choice. That's a cage. Maybe, but it was a comfortable cage, and I had children to think about. She reached for my hand again. I had you. I didn't take it. You've been living a lie for 40 years. Yes, my whole life has been a lie. Yes, and you're only telling me now because you're dying? Yes, she didn't flinch. I'm a coward, Sarah. I've always been a coward, but I won't die a coward. I won't take this to my grave and leave you all wondering why your father seems so cold, why our family has always felt like a performance, why nothing has ever felt quite real. I sank back into the chair, my legs unable to hold me. What about David and Emma? Are they Richard's biological children? Both of them. You're the only one. The only one. The only one whose entire identity was a lie. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Tears streamed down my mother's face. I'm so sorry for what I did, and I'm sorry for keeping it from you. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of us. But secrets? Secrets have a way of poisoning everything they touch. I looked at this woman, this stranger who had raised me, loved me, shaped me into who I was, and I felt nothing. Nothing but the vast, echoing emptiness of everything I'd believed crumbling to dust. Parenthesis 1982, 40 years earlier. Margaret Williams Chen was 28 years old and invisible. That's how she felt anyway. Invisible, irrelevant, a pretty decoration in her husband's carefully constructed life, something to be displayed at parties and ignored the rest of the time. Richard had been different when they were dating, attentive, passionate, full of plans for their future together. But the man she'd married had slowly transformed into someone she barely recognized, a workaholic, consumed by ambition, more interested in spreadsheets than in his wife. They'd been trying for a baby for 2 years. Margaret wanted one desperately, hoped that a child might bring them closer together, might remind Richard why he'd married her in the first place. But month after month, the tests came back negative, and Richard's disappointment grew more palpable each time. Maybe we should see a specialist, she'd suggested once. Maybe you should relax, he'd replied, not looking up from his papers. Stress is probably the problem. Just relax, Margaret. Just relax, as if she could relax when her husband came home at midnight and left before dawn. As if she could relax when she spent every evening alone in their beautiful house, surrounded by expensive furniture she hadn't chosen and artwork she didn't understand. And then there was Michael. Michael Harrison was everything Richard wasn't. Where Richard was cold and calculating, Michael was warm and spontaneous. Where Richard treated her like an accessory, Michael made her feel like the center of the universe. He was Richard's business partner. They'd started the firm together right out of business school. He came to dinner parties, helped with fundraisers, was always around, always watching Margaret with those dark eyes, always finding excuses to touch her arm, her shoulder, the small of her back. The affair started at a company retreat. Richard had spent the entire weekend networking, leaving Margaret alone at their cabin. Michael had shown up with a bottle of wine and a smile that made her feel like the only woman in the world. "Richard doesn't deserve you," he'd said, and she'd believed him. The affair lasted 11 months. 11 months of stolen afternoons, secret phone calls, the intoxicating thrill of doing something forbidden. Margaret knew it was wrong, knew it could destroy everything, but she couldn't stop. Michael made her feel alive in a way Richard never had. And then she got pregnant. The timing made it impossible to know for sure who the father was. She'd been with both men in the relevant window, and back then there was no simple test to determine paternity. Margaret made a choice, the practical choice, the safe choice. She told Richard the baby was his. His reaction was everything she'd hoped for. He came home early, brought her flowers, talked about the future. For a few brief weeks, Margaret thought maybe she could have it all: a devoted husband, a loving home, a child to complete their family. Then Michael found out. "I know it's mine," he said, cornering her at a party while Richard worked the room. I can see it in your face every time you look at me. That baby is mine, Margaret. It's not. The timing. Don't lie to me. His grip on her arm tightened. I love you. I want to be with you. Leave him. We'll raise our child together. Michael, I can't. You can. You're just too afraid to try. He was right. She was afraid of scandal, of poverty, of starting over. Richard offered security, stability, the comfortable life she'd grown accustomed to. Michael offered passion, excitement, uncertainty. Margaret chose security. It's over, she told him the next day. Whatever we had, it's done. I'm staying with Richard. I'm having his baby. And you need to move on. Michael didn't take it well. The threats started a week later. Phone calls in the middle of the night, notes left on her car, Michael following her to the grocery store, the doctor's office, the salon. I'll tell Richard everything, he said. I'll tell him about us, about the baby. I'll destroy your perfect little life. Please, Michael, just let me go. I can't. His eyes were wild, desperate. I love you. I need you. And if I can't have you, no one can. Margaret lived in terror. Every time the phone rang, every time Richard came home early, she was certain the truth was about to come out. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, became a ghost in her own life. The baby she'd wanted so badly, felt like a ticking time bomb. And then one night, 3 weeks before her due date, Michael called with an ultimatum. Meet me at my apartment tomorrow night, alone, or I send everything to Richard, the letters, the photos, all of it. Margaret knew she had to end it. She just didn't know how final that ending would be. October 14th, 1982, asterisk. The apartment building was quiet when Margaret arrived. She'd told Richard she was visiting a friend, a lie that came so easily now it barely registered. The pregnancy had given her a convenient excuse for everything: mood swings, strange cravings, the need for space. Richard accepted it all without question, too distracted by his work to notice the fear in his wife's eyes. Michael's apartment was on the 3rd floor. She climbed the stairs slowly, her swollen belly making every step an effort. The baby kicked as she reached his door, as if sensing what was about to happen. She knocked. "It's open." Michael was standing by the window when she entered, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The apartment was a mess, papers scattered everywhere, empty bottles on the counter, the curtains drawn against the evening light. He turned to face her, and Margaret saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Desperation, madness, the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You came. You didn't give me much choice," he laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Choice, that's rich coming from you. You had a choice, Margaret. You could have chosen me. Instead, you chose him, the boring husband with the boring job and the boring life. Richard is a good man. Richard is a machine." Michael hurled his glass against the wall, shattering it. He staggered backward, one hand reaching up to touch the wound, staring at the blood that poured through his fingers. "Margaret." He fell, first to his knees, then forward onto his face, and then he was still. Margaret stood over the body for what felt like hours. Her throat burned, her hands shook. The letter opener was still in her grip, blood dripping from the blade onto the hardwood floor. I killed him. The thought was distant, abstract, as if it belonged to someone else. I killed Michael. The baby kicked again, bringing her back to the present. She was standing in a dead man's apartment, covered in his blood, with less than 3 weeks until her due date. She had to move, had to think, had to survive. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of adrenaline and terror. Margaret cleaned the apartment methodically, wiping down surfaces, collecting any evidence of her presence, disposing of the letter opener in a dumpster 3 blocks away. She changed into clothes from Michael's closet, stuffed her blood-stained dress into a trash bag, and left the building through the service entrance. No one saw her. No one ever would. Michael Harrison's body was discovered 3 days later. The police investigation was thorough but inconclusive. Michael had enemies, disgruntled investors, angry ex-girlfriends, business rivals who'd lost money on his schemes. The detective in charge interviewed dozens of suspects, but the case eventually went cold. Richard never suspected his wife. Why would he? Margaret was 8 months pregnant, a devoted spouse who'd spent the night in question at home with a migraine. She had no motive, no connection to Michael beyond social pleasantries. The perfect alibi. 3 weeks later, Margaret gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Sarah. Asterisk, 1984, 2 years later. Richard Chen found the letters on a Tuesday. He'd been looking for an old tax document, rifling through the filing cabinet in Margaret's home office, when his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A manila envelope, tucked behind years of household receipts, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. He almost didn't open it, almost respected his wife's privacy, almost put it back where he'd found it and pretended he'd never seen it. But something made him hesitate. Some instinct, honed by years of reading people across boardroom tables, told him this envelope contained something important. He opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in handwriting he recognized, Michael Harrison's handwriting. "My dearest Margaret," the first one began, "I can't stop thinking about our afternoon together. The way you looked at me, the way you touched me. I've never felt anything like this before." Richard read every letter. His hands trembled. His vision blurred. Each word was a knife, twisting deeper and deeper into the life he'd thought he knew. His wife had been having an affair with his business partner for almost a year. And then he found the newspaper clipping. Local businessman found dead in apartment. The article was from October 1982. Michael's murder. An unsolved case that had haunted the firm for years, sending clients fleeing and nearly bankrupting the company. Why would Margaret keep this? Unless Richard's mind worked through the possibilities, the timeline, the implications. Margaret's strange behavior in the months before Michael's death, her sudden calm afterward, the way she'd avoided the memorial service, claimed morning sickness even though she was well into her 3rd trimester. And Sarah, born 3 weeks after Michael's murder. Sarah, with her dark eyes and her sharp cheekbones and the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, exactly the way Michael used to. Oh, God. Richard sat in his wife's office for a very long time, holding the letters, staring at the newspaper clipping, feeling his entire world rearrange itself into something monstrous. Then he put everything back exactly where he'd found it, and he began to plan. The confrontation happened 2 weeks later. Richard waited until Sarah was asleep, until the house was quiet, until there was nowhere for Margaret to run. Then he walked into the living room where she sat reading, dropped the envelope on the coffee table, and watched the color drain from her face. "Richard, don't." His voice was ice. "Don't lie to me. Don't make excuses. Just tell me the truth. For once in our marriage, tell me the truth." Margaret stared at the envelope as if it were a snake about to strike. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. I found them by accident. But you kept them, Margaret. You kept love letters from the man you were sleeping with. From the man—" He couldn't say it, couldn't form the words. "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I killed him. I killed Michael." Silence. Richard had suspected, of course, had pieced together the timeline, recognized the motive. But hearing her say it, Hearing his wife, the mother of his children, confess to murder was something else entirely. "He was going to tell you everything," Margaret continued, her words coming faster now, tumbling over each other. "He was going to destroy our family. He attacked me, Richard. He had his hands around my throat. I was just defending myself." "And Sarah?" Richard cut her off. "Was Sarah just defending yourself too?" Margaret flinched. "Is she mine?" "I don't know." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. The timing, it was impossible to know for sure. "I wanted her to be yours. I prayed she was yours." "But she might be his?" "Yes." Richard closed his eyes. He thought about Sarah, beautiful, bright Sarah, barely 2 years old, calling him Dada with that gummy smile. He thought about the life they'd built, the company they'd grown from the ashes of Michael's death. He thought about what would happen if the truth came out. Scandal, prison, the destruction of everything he'd worked for. And then he thought about another option. "Here's what's going to happen," Richard said, opening his eyes. Margaret looked up, confusion and fear mingling on her face. "You're going to stay. You're going to be my wife, the perfect wife, the devoted mother. You're going to help me build this company into an empire, and you're never, ever going to mention Michael Harrison's name again. Richard, in return, I'll keep your secret. I'll protect you from the consequences of what you did. I'll raise Sarah as my own daughter and never tell her the truth." Margaret stared at him. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm saving you." Richard's voice was flat, emotionless. "You killed a man, Margaret. You would go to prison for the rest of your life. Is that what you want? To leave Sarah without a mother? To destroy everything we've built?" "No, but—" "Then we have a deal." He stood, straightening his tie. "I expect dinner on the table at 6. I expect a house to be spotless. I expect you to smile at every function, charm every client, be the wife I need you to be." He walked toward the door, then paused. "And Margaret, if you ever try to leave, if you ever think about telling anyone what happened, I will bury you. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Good." He walked out of the room, leaving his wife alone with her secrets and her guilt and the prison sentence she'd exchanged for another kind of cage. 2023, present day. I left the hospice that night in a daze. My mother had tried to say more, explanations, justifications, pleas for understanding, but I couldn't hear her anymore, couldn't look at her, couldn't reconcile the woman who'd raised me with the woman who'd confessed to murder. I drove home on autopilot, barely registering the traffic lights, the other cars, the world continuing its normal rotation while mine collapsed. My husband James was waiting when I walked through the door. "How is she?" I looked at him, this man I'd been married to for 15 years, the father of my children, and wondered how many secrets he was keeping from me, how many lies formed the foundation of our life together. "Sarah?" She told me something. The words came out flat, hollow. Something about my father, my real father. James's face creased with concern. "What do you mean, real father?" I told him, not everything, not the murder, not yet, but enough. The affair, the uncertain paternity, the fact that Richard Chen, the man I'd called Dad for 42 years, might not share a single strand of DNA with me. James listened in silence. When I finished, he pulled me into his arms and held me while I sobbed against his shoulder. "We can do a DNA test," he said, "if you want to know for sure." Would it matter? I pulled back, wiping my eyes. Even if Richard is my biological father, everything else is still a lie. My entire childhood was a performance. My mother was a... she was a... I couldn't say it. Not yet. A what? I can't. Not yet. I need to think. I need to. I needed to talk to my father, to Richard, to the man who had known the truth for 40 years and never said a word. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. Richard Chen had aged well, still trim, still sharp, still carrying himself with the rigid posture of a man who'd spent decades commanding boardrooms. He was in his study when I arrived, reading the Financial Times, looking for all the world like a man without a care. "Sarah?" He looked up, surprised. "I thought you'd be at the hospice." "I was. Yesterday." I closed the study door behind me. "Mom told me." I watched his face carefully, looking for surprise, for guilt, for any crack in the mask he'd worn for 4 decades. Nothing. His expression remained perfectly neutral, perfectly controlled. "Told you what?" I sat. "Your mother has always been dramatic, especially now with the medication. Don't." My voice was sharper than I intended. "Don't gaslight me. Don't pretend she was confused or delirious. She knew exactly what she was saying, and so do you." Silence. For a long moment, Richard just looked at me. Then, slowly, he set down his newspaper. "What did she tell you, exactly?" "That she had an affair with your business partner, that I might be his daughter. That she," I hesitated, "that she killed him, and that you've known about all of it for 40 years. Richard's expression finally changed. Not guilt, not shame, satisfaction. "She told you everything then." "Why do you look pleased about that?" "Because I've been waiting 40 years for this moment." He leaned back in his chair. 40 years of playing the devoted husband, the loving father, the perfect family man. 40 years of watching your mother perform her role, knowing what she really was underneath. You blackmailed her. I protected her, protected all of us. Do you have any idea what would have happened if the truth had come out? Prison for your mother, scandal for the family, the destruction of everything I'd built. Everything we built, you mean. Her, too." Richard laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Your mother didn't build anything. She smiled and nodded and played hostess while I created an empire. That was our deal. That was the price of her freedom." "That's not freedom. That's slavery. Call it what you want." He shrugged. "She made her choice. She could have gone to the police, confessed, faced the consequences. Instead, she chose comfort, security, me." I stared at this man, this stranger who had raised me, paid for my education, walked me down the aisle at my wedding. "Did you ever love her? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Richard was quiet for a moment. "I loved her once, before I found out what she was. After that," he shook his head, "after that, she was just a tool, a means to an end, a pretty face to distract from the darkness underneath." "And me? Was I just a tool too?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something human in them. "You were different. You were innocent. Whatever your mother did, whatever blood runs through your veins, you didn't choose any of it. I raised you as my own because you deserved better than the circumstances of your birth. But you never told me the truth. What good would it have done? Would knowing that your mother was a murderer have made your childhood happier? Would knowing that your biological father died before you were born have improved your life?" I didn't have an answer. I made a choice, Sarah. I chose to give you a normal childhood, a stable home, a father who was present even if he wasn't perfect. I chose to protect you from the truth because the truth would have destroyed you. And now? Richard stood, walked to the window, stared out at the manicured lawn. Now, your mother is dying, and she's decided to unburden her conscience at the expense of everyone else. Typical Margaret, selfish to the very end. That's not fair, isn't it? He turned back to face me. "She's dying, Sarah. In a few days, maybe a week, she'll be gone. And the rest of us will be left to pick up the pieces of the bomb she just dropped. He walked toward the door. I'd advise you to think carefully about what you do next. Your brother and sister don't know any of this. Your children don't know. Your husband doesn't know the full truth. You can keep it that way. Bury it with your mother. Let the dead past stay dead. Or you can tell everyone, watch your family tear itself apart, and spend the rest of your life wondering if the truth was worth the cost. He opened the door. The choice is yours, Sarah, just like it was your mother's 40 years ago. I hope you make a better one. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to James, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every memory, every moment of my 42 years through the lens of this new, terrible knowledge. The way my father, Richard, had always seemed slightly distant with me, slightly less warm than he was with David and Emma. The way my mother had overcompensated, showering me with attention, always making sure I knew I was loved. The way family dinners had felt like performances, everyone playing their parts in a script I hadn't known existed. It all made sense now. Horrible, devastating sense. I called my brother David the next morning. I need to see you, today. It's important. Is it Mom? His voice was heavy with concern. Is she... She's still alive, but there's something else, something she told me that you need to know. Silence. Sarah, you're scaring me. I know, I'm scared too. Can you come to my house? Bring Emma if you can reach her. I'll be there in an hour. They arrived together, David and Emma, my younger siblings, the two people I'd protected, annoyed, and loved for as long as I could remember. David was 38, a surgeon with steady hands and a steadier temperament. Emma was 35, an artist who'd spent her 20s bouncing between communes and ashrams before settling down with a carpenter named Mike and having 3 kids in 4 years. We were as different as 3 people could be, but we were family. At least, I'd always thought we were. I told them in my living room. James had taken the kids to his mother's house, giving us privacy for a conversation that would change everything. I sat across from David and Emma, watching their faces as I recounted what our mother had told me. The affair, the uncertain paternity, the murder, the 40 years of lies. When I finished, Emma was crying. David's face had gone completely white. "This can't be true," he said. "Mom would never. She couldn't." She did. My voice was steady, though I felt anything but. She told me herself, and Dad confirmed it. Dad knew. Emma's voice was a whisper. All this time? All this time. He's been holding it over her for 40 years, using it to control her. David stood up abruptly, walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. "So you're not our full sister?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm your sister, David. Whatever DNA says, I'm your sister." "I know." He turned back to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I know, Sarah. I don't know how to process this. Our whole life has been a lie. Everything we thought we knew about our family." "I know." Emma came to sit beside me, took my hand. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know. Mom's dying. In a few days, maybe less, she'll be gone. Part of me wants to pretend this never happened, bury it with her, move on with her lives. And the other part? I looked at my siblings. These people I'd grown up with, fought with, loved with every fiber of my being. The other part wants justice. For Michael Harrison. For Mom, trapped in that marriage for 40 years. For all of us, living in a house built on secrets and lies. David sat back down. What kind of justice? Mom's dying. Dad's in his 70s. What's the point of dragging all this into the open now? The point is the truth. Emma's voice was fiercer than I'd ever heard it. The point is that we deserve to know who we really are. That Michael Harrison's family deserves to know what happened to him. Does he have family? David asked. Did anyone even look? I hadn't thought about that. Michael Harrison, My biological father had been more than a murder victim. He'd been a person with a history, with people who loved him. "I'll find out," I said. "I'll find out everything." Michael Harrison had a sister. Her name was Patricia, and she was 73 years old, living in a retirement community in Arizona. I found her through a combination of ancestry websites and old newspaper archives, a tedious, heartbreaking process that took nearly a week during which my mother continued to fade. I visited her every day, sat beside her bed, tried to reconcile the dying woman with the confession she'd made. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in memories I couldn't follow. "Did you tell them?" she asked once, her voice barely audible. "David and Emma?" "Yes." "Are they angry?" "They're confused, hurt, processing." She nodded weakly. "And Richard?" "We talked. He's not a monster, Sarah." Her hand found mine, cold and frail. "I know he seems that way, but he could have destroyed me, could have sent me to prison, taken everything. Instead, he gave me a life, gave us a family. A family built on blackmail? A family built on compromise." She coughed, a terrible rattling sound. "Every marriage is compromise, Sarah. Every family has secrets. Ours were just bigger than most." I didn't argue. There was no point. She was dying, and nothing I said would change what she'd done. I flew to Arizona on a Thursday. Patricia Harrison lived in a modest condo surrounded by photographs of her brother, young Michael in a graduation gown, middle-aged Michael at a company party, Michael with his arm around a woman I assumed was a girlfriend, Michael who looked like me. The resemblance was undeniable. The same dark eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same way of tilting his head. Looking at those photographs was like looking into a mirror that reflected a past I'd never known. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, as Patricia showed me to her living room. "Your call was quite mysterious." She settled into an armchair, studying me with eyes that were sharp despite her age. "You said you had information about my brother's death." "I do." I sat across from her, clutching my purse like a lifeline. "But first, I need to tell you something else, something that might be difficult to hear." Patricia's expression didn't change. "I've been waiting 40 years to know what happened to Michael. Whatever you have to say, I can handle it." I took a deep breath, and I told her everything. When I finished, Patricia was silent for a long time. She stared at the photographs on her mantle, at Michael's face frozen in time, forever young, and I watched tears stream down her weathered cheeks. "I always knew," she finally said. "Knew what?" "That Michael's death wasn't random, that someone he knew had killed him." She turned to look at me. "The police said it was probably a robbery gone wrong, but nothing was taken. They said it might have been a disgruntled client, but Michael's clients were all accounted for." She stood, walked to the mantel, picked up one of the photographs. "I hired a private investigator years ago. He found some things, rumors of an affair, whispers about a married woman, but he could never identify her. The trail went cold. It was my mother, Margaret Chen." "I know." Patricia set down the photograph. "I know now, and I know something else, too." She turned to face me. "You're his daughter, aren't you? That's why you're here. That's why you look so much like him." I nodded, unable to speak. Patricia crossed the room, took my hands in hers. "I thought I'd lost everything when Michael died, my only sibling, gone before he turned 30. But now," she reached up, touched my cheek. "Now I have a niece." My mother died on a Sunday. I was there when it happened, holding her hand, watching the monitors flatline. David and Emma were there too, standing at the foot of the bed, their faces masks of complicated grief. Richard wasn't there. He'd refused to come to the hospice, refused to see his wife of 45 years in her final moments. I said goodbye to Margaret a long time ago, he told me when I asked. Whatever is dying in that bed isn't my wife, it's just the shell she hid inside. The funeral was 3 days later. It was small, private, restricted to family and a few close friends. Richard sat in the front row, playing the part of the grieving widower, accepting condolences from people who had no idea what kind of marriage they'd actually had. I watched him throughout the service, this man I'd called father for 42 years, and I made a decision. I'm going to the police. I said it 2 days after the funeral, sitting in Richard's study, watching his face for any reaction. There was none. With what evidence? He asked calmly. Your mother's deathbed confession? The word of a dying woman on morphine? I have the letters, the newspaper clipping, and Patricia Harrison, Michael's sister, is willing to support a new investigation. Still nothing. Richard just sat there, perfectly composed, as if I told him I was thinking about redecorating. And what do you hope to accomplish? Your mother is dead. There's no one left to punish. There's you. His eyebrow raised slightly. Me? You've known about a murder for 40 years. You've been obstructing justice, destroying evidence, using that knowledge to control my mother. That makes you an accessory after the fact. Interesting theory. Richard stood, walked to his liquor cabinet, poured himself a scotch. And what proof do you have of any of that? Your own admission, the conversation we had in this room. A private conversation between father and daughter, with no witnesses and no recording. He took a sip of his drink. Try again. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Richard had done this for 40 years, maintained control, held all the cards, made sure he was never vulnerable. Why would that change now? It doesn't matter, I said. Even if I can't prove your involvement, I can still tell the police what Mom confessed. They can reopen the investigation. They might find evidence that was missed the first time. They might. Richard returned to his chair. Or they might not. It's been 40 years, Sarah. Whatever evidence existed is long gone. You'd be dragging your mother's name through the mud, destroying this family's reputation. And for what? A cold case that will never be solved? For the truth. The truth, he laughed. The truth is overrated. The truth won't bring Michael Harrison back. The truth won't erase what your mother did. All the truth will do is destroy everything she built, everything we built, and leave you with nothing but ashes. Maybe that's what we deserve. Richard studied me over the rim of his glass. Maybe. But is it what your children deserve? Your brother and sister? Patricia Harrison, that sweet old woman who just found her long-lost niece? He leaned forward. Think carefully, Sarah. Once you open this door, you can't close it again. The media will descend. The lawyers will circle. Every detail of your mother's life and your life will be picked apart by strangers. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you're about to do? I stood up, walked to the door. I understand that I've spent 42 years living a lie, that my mother spent 45 years in a cage of your making, that Michael Harrison's family has spent 4 decades not knowing what happened to him. I turned to face him. I understand that truth matters, even when it's painful, even when it costs everything. Then you're a fool, Richard said, just like your mother. Maybe, but at least I'll be able to live with myself. I walked out and didn't look back. I went to the police the next day. Detective Maria Santos listened to my story with a mixture of skepticism and interest. She took notes, asked questions, and promised to review the cold case file and see if there was enough evidence to reopen the investigation. I have to be honest with you, she said as I was leaving. After 40 years, the chances of finding anything conclusive are slim. Witnesses have died, memories have faded, physical evidence has degraded. I know. But we'll look. If your mother really did this, she deserves to be held accountable. even posthumously. I nodded and left. The news broke 3 weeks later. Someone at the police department leaked the story. The wife of a prominent businessman confessing to a 40-year-old murder on her deathbed. The media descended exactly as Richard had predicted, camping outside our houses, digging through our trash, interviewing anyone who would talk. Chen family secrets, murder, affair, and deathbed confession. Prominent businesswoman accused of 1982 killing. The Chen dynasty crumbles inside the scandal. I watched my life disintegrate in real time. My law firm asked me to take a leave of absence just until the media attention dies down. My children came home from school crying, tormented by classmates who'd seen the headlines. My husband stood by me, but I could see the strain in his eyes, the exhaustion of defending a family he'd never truly known. David stopped speaking to me entirely. "You didn't have to do this," he said during our last conversation. "You could have let it go. Let Mom rest in peace." She wasn't resting in peace, David. She was running from the truth. And now the truth is destroying all of us. Are you happy? I wasn't happy, but I was at peace for the first time in months. Richard was arrested on a Tuesday. The police had found something. I never learned exactly what, some piece of evidence he'd thought was long destroyed. He was charged with obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. The trial would take years, the lawyers said, and he'd probably never see prison time at his age. But his empire was finished. Clients fled the firm. Investors pulled their money. The Chen name, once synonymous with success, became synonymous with scandal. I watched him being led away in handcuffs, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just the hollow emptiness of justice too long delayed. Emma was the only one who stood by me through it all. "You did the right thing," she said one night, sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, "even if it doesn't feel like it. David will never forgive me. David needs time. He's always been the one who wanted everything to be perfect. The perfect son, the perfect family, the perfect life. Finding out it was all a lie, he doesn't know how to process that." "And you?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "I always knew something was wrong. Not the specifics, obviously, but the way Dad looked at Mom sometimes, like she was an employee, not a wife. The way Mom was always performing, always on. It never felt real." She turned to look at me. "At least now I know why." 5 years later. The cemetery was quiet in the early morning. I came here every year on the anniversary, not to my mother's grave, but to Michael Harrison's. Patricia had arranged for a proper headstone after the investigation, replacing the simple marker that had stood for 4 decades. Michael Harrison, 1954 to 1982. Beloved brother, finally at rest. I knelt beside the grave, placing the flowers I'd brought, white lilies, his favorite, according to Patricia. "I never knew you," I said softly. "I never got the chance, but I carry you with me every day. In my face, in my blood, in the parts of myself I'm still discovering." A bird called somewhere in the trees. "I hope you found peace. I hope wherever you are, you understand why I did what I did, why I couldn't let the truth stay buried anymore." I stood, brushed the grass from my knees. "I'm sorry you died. I'm sorry my mother did what she did. But I'm not sorry I exist. I'm not sorry for the life I've built, the family I've created, the person I've become." I touched the headstone one last time. "Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Father." The walk back to my car was longer than I remembered. 5 years had changed me, aged me, hardened me, forced me to become someone stronger than I'd ever thought I could be. The Sarah who'd walked into that hospice room, innocent and trusting, was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked the truth in the face and survived. My phone buzzed as I reached the parking lot. A text from James. Dinner's at 7. Kids are excited to see you. A text from Emma. Call me when you get a chance. Good news for once. And a text from an unknown number that made my breath catch. It's David. I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to talk, if you're willing. I drove home through streets that had witnessed my worst moments and my best ones, past the church where I'd gotten married, back when I was still Sarah Chen, daddy's girl, believer in perfect families, past the hospital where my children were born, where I'd become a mother, and finally understood the fierce, terrible love that could drive someone to do unforgivable things. Past the courthouse, where Richard had been sentenced. 3 years, ultimately, though he'd served less than 1 before his health failed and he was released to die at home. He was gone now, too, buried beside a wife he'd controlled for decades, in a grave I would never visit. The house was warm when I arrived. James met me at the door with a kiss. My teenagers, 16 and 14 now, old enough to understand everything that had happened, hugged me without being asked. Aunt Emma called, my daughter said. She's bringing the cousins over for dinner. Uncle David texted Mom, my son added. I think they're finally going to make up. I looked at my family, this imperfect, complicated, beautiful family, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. That night, after dinner, after the dishes were done and the kids were in their rooms, I sat on the back porch and watched the stars come out. James joined me after a while, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Penny for your thoughts? I took the wine, took a sip, considered the question. I was thinking about my mother. Good thoughts or bad ones? Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. I leaned back in my chair. She did a terrible thing. She killed a man, lied about it for 40 years, let herself be controlled rather than face the consequences. But she was also my mother. She loved me in her own way. She protected me, even if that protection was built on lies. James took my hand. People are complicated. Yes. I looked at the stars. People are complicated. Families are complicated. The truth is complicated. Any regrets? I thought about the question, really thought about it. Did I regret exposing my mother's secret? Some days, yes. When David wouldn't speak to me, when my children were bullied, when the media turned our tragedy into entertainment, those days I wondered if Richard had been right, if some truths were better left buried. But then I'd think about Patricia Harrison, finally knowing what happened to her brother, about Emma, freed from the vague unease that had haunted her childhood, about myself, no longer living in a house built on lies. No, I said finally. No regrets. James squeezed my hand. Good. My mother's deathbed confession destroyed our family. Not immediately, not in the clean, dramatic way it happens in movies, but slowly, methodically, brick by brick. It destroyed the myth we'd built around ourselves, the story we'd told for generations, the comfortable fiction of the perfect Chen family. But here's the thing about destruction. Sometimes you have to tear down the old to build something new. The family I have now isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and full of people who've hurt each other and forgiven each other and learned to love each other despite everything. But it's real, it's honest, and for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. I am Sarah Harrison Chen, daughter of Margaret Chen and Michael Harrison, raised by a man who wasn't my father, shaped by secrets that nearly destroyed me, but still standing, still fighting, still here. And that, in the end, is enough.